Mets Musings is an unofficial, independent podcast covering New York's National League Baseball team. It is not affiliated in any way with Major League Baseball or the New York Mets.
This is Len and Jeff from Baseball and Barbecue.
And the one place to go for New York Mets news,
Past week game reviews,
upcoming series previews,
interviews,
analysis,
opinion, and what's going down on the farm. It's Mets Musings with Gary Mack. So keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets. With Gary Mack.
Now it's time for some New York Mets baseball talk. Here's Gary Mack bringing you the latest news and analysis from Mets Nation and the world of baseball on another edition of Mets Musings.
Edition of Mets Musings, number 353. I hope everybody had a great week out there. Great 2 weeks, actually. Took a week off last week. Not much really to talk about, folks. Didn't want to bore you, so took a little bit of a week off there. And back, refreshed. Got a terrific guest. You're going to love it. And he'll be on a little bit later. But let's see. What's going on? Well, the Mets got to catch you. No, it's not JT Realmuto. But they did re-sign Devin Mesoraco to a minor league deal. And he will get a spring training invite. And I'd be shocked if he doesn't make the team out of spring training. I'd also be shocked if they don't move Travis d'Arnaud somewhere. I think that is the reason why they signed Mesoraco. Good deal. He knows the team, knows the pitching staff. I see good things happening from this particular move, and I think it was a good move on the part of the Mets to do this at this particular time. So it gives them a couple of good veterans and one guy that's Wilson Ramos, good catcher, knows the division, doesn't know he's got to learn the pitching staff. But another guy, Mesoraco, knows the pitching staff, knows the league, knows the division, and d'Arnaud, who's familiar with it all, will be in the running too. It also gives the Mets flexibility in that if they were to move d'Arnaud, that doesn't move Nido into the backup. Nido has done a fine job, and I think they're still high on him. But I think he needs a little bit more seasoning, especially on the offensive side of the ball. The defense he did pretty well with. But I think on the offensive side of the ball needs a little bit of seasoning. And this could be the perfect thing for him because he can go to AAA. Get some seasoning there. There's also talk that Mesoraco could start the season at AAA. And if an injury could come up, I feel as if they're going to try to move d'Arnaud for some sort of relief pitching, another arm or two, maybe a middle-of-the-road prospect they can get for d'Arnaud, I don't know, and a major league reliever. That remains to be seen. But that is one of the Mets news. And, of course, the news in the division, I guess, would be that the Phillies acquired Realmuto. It sucks still having him in the division. But, look, we've dealt with him before. So, he's just moving from one team to the other. Does he make the Phillies a better team? Without a doubt. But there's still some question marks with the Phils. Is Arrieta, can he return to prominence? They did give up a starting pitcher. There's questions with everybody. And until the season, that's why they play the games. Until we see people play at what they can do in the long run, we're not going to know anything. But Brody's high on this team. Brody Van Wagen, and he thinks they're going to win, and he says they're not. He's not the only one that says it. So let's see. One thing he has put into this organization is, it seems, a winning spirit. He's definitely infused that in with everyone. And, that's something we didn't have as much of before. And he seemed to have gotten more control over different things. And I believe he's not done yet doing something, tweaking this this roster, if you will. I believe there's still some moves he plans on making. He could move Todd Frazier, could move Darno, as we said. Number of things they can still do. And the one thing that he has done immensely is improve the depth of this team in the offseason. I can't wait. Outfield, infield depth is awesome, and you're not getting 4A players, and that's not a knock on the Josh Sattons and the Eric Campbells of the world, but would you rather have a Jed Lowry come in, or one of the other guys they acquired rather than that? I would say yes. So that's another interesting thing. Again, signing Mesoraco. Now you got Mesoraco, Darno, Ramos, and don't forget now, Nito has 2 years of spotty, but he's been called up a couple of times, so he's got a little experience now, and he knows the pitching staff. So that adds even more depth to this team so far. So lots of good signs for the Mets, I think, moving forward. Now, of course, the other big news of the week was not really Mets related, but it was the the rule changes that the commissioners proposed and the MLBPA, the Players Association, has counted with some, relief pitcher pitching to a minimum of 3 batters. I don't see how this is going to work out. They could try it. The 20-second clock again, renaming the disabled list to the injured list and changing it back to a 15-day disabled list. I kind of like the 10-day. Maybe they should have both. I don't know. I kind of like a 10-day because if a guy's got a nagging little injury that could heal with 4 or 5 days of rest, then the 10-day is good. You only lose them for the 10 days, whereas you're going to lose them now for another 5 days for something that's going to be totally healed. I don't know. I could live with it. The thing that really got me, of course, was the DH, and I'm totally against the DH. I am getting to the point whereas it looks like it will be inevitable. The Players Association is pushing it for this season. I don't see how they could approve it for this season other than teams have not, in the National League, have not prepared for it. Now, all reports, and if you do look at the Mets, is the Mets would be in a great position if they added a DH this year. And the position of DH has changed for the most part. You don't see the big names in a rare situation now. You do, but you don't see the big names signing to hang on and be a DH like it was a few years ago. Now teams are using the DH in a different manner. They're using it more to rest players and to get at bats for players that normally may not have a position. And but they're moving people in and out of the lineup and in the DH position, and that's something different that we hadn't seen before. That's something that's fairly new over the last few years. So how would the Mets benefit by getting a DH? Well, they have Robertson Cano. They can move into a slot if they wanted to give him a day or two off. Todd Frazier could move into a spot. Peter Alonso could come in and not have to worry about defense. He could go into a spot as a DH and switch back and forth, against lefties. He could play first base. He could DH on other days. Much better names that you ever think of in the Mets. And how about this one? What about if Yoenis Cespedes came back? He could DH and still heal because he wouldn't have to be pounding out in the outfield all the time. He'd be off his feet for the most part, just batting and, running, of course. But, it wouldn't be – you would take the defense out of the equation there, and he could come back maybe a little bit sooner. So looking at it from that viewpoint, the Mets are in a pretty good situation. Jed Lowry could be used as a Jeff McNeil in and out of the, play the field and DH as well. So the Mets actually are in a decent situation if a DH was to be included this season or even next year. And you have to wonder if Brody Van Wagenen, the general manager, had that in mind, had an inkling this was going to happen when he started constructing this team. Makes you wonder a little bit, doesn't it? But we'll see how that all plays out. Their meeting, don't know if all the owners in the National League will go for a DH either next year or this year. Whether or not they be in favor of it, I think they need 75% of the owners to approve. I thought at one time that it was a unanimous vote. Now I've heard 75%. Not real sure which is the current thing that they have to do for that, but we shall see. And everybody says it's inevitable, so it's sad that would come about, but I don't know, not much we can do about it as fans. If National League fans don't want it, they have to get together and they have to make their voice known to Major League Baseball and the Players Association. It's that simple. All right, let's take a break. I've talked long enough. And see, when I'm off, I come back. I got things to say. Let's take a break and be back after these massages.
Looking for great Cardinals talk? Then check out Conversations with C70. My name's Daniel Shoftaw, and I talk with some of the great bloggers on the internet today about their teams, but it always goes back to the Cardinals. Find the latest episode on my website, www.cardinal70.com, or at baseballpodcast.net.
Did you know that Baseball PhD can be heard on baseballtalkradio.com?
Our shows rotate with other top baseball podcasts.
Now don't forget, that's baseballtalkradio.com.
With us, we'll help you get a PhD in life through baseball.
With baseballtalkradio.com, you'll hear the rest of the excellent universe of baseball podcasts.
516-619-6341. That is the comment voicemail hotline if you'd like to be a part of the show. And drop us a line, leave us a comment or a voicemail, question, anything at all. Call that number, 516-619-6341. Or go to MetsMusings.com and click on that widget in the middle of the screen, and that's a speak pipe, and you can leave a voicemail right through your computer through your computer's microphone. Or if you prefer to do things the old-fashioned way, send us an email at metsmusings@gmail.com. The Facebook page is facebook.com/groups/metsmusings, and the Twitter handle is at metsmusings1.
With all the Mets news, it is the news from around the world and around the corner. Here's Gary Mack.
And my guest tonight is the author of a terrific book called Mets in Tens. His name is Brian Wright. And Brian, welcome to Mets Musings.
Oh, thanks so much, Gary. Great to be on.
Brian, let's start off by saying what made you come up with this book, and what premise did you take to decide to write this?
Yeah, there are a lot of different factors that made this book possible. I had, in addition, I guess, on the side of my full-time job, I wrote for a few different websites like Bleacher Report and a site called The Sports Daily. I did a lot of list articles, so maybe that's part of the inspiration. But I guess the Met side of it, in addition to the obvious of me being a diehard fan, the incident in 2015 during the playoffs, Game 2, where Chase Utley runs into the back leg of Ruben Tejada, breaks his leg, and somehow was called safe and eventually was the reason for the Dodgers winning that game. It meant only it added to his villain status. I mean, after my rage had subsided, I started to think, well, where does Chase Utley now rank in terms of the greatest villains in Mets history? It just was something that was kind of ingrained in me, thinking about lists and all that. And then I started to think about that. And then I started to think about other lists in Mets history, and that kind of generated this potential book idea, which I was going to do independently. And then was very fortunate to get the History Press to sign on to it. So it really started with that playoff game. I in a weird way, I should thank Chase Utley, but I'm not going to.
So something good came out of the Chase Utley play.
Yeah.
So how did you become a Mets fan? I mean, you live in Virginia. How did this love affair with this team begin, and join the rest of us nuts that put up with all the aggravation for these years?
Yeah, I grew up in Virginia. I live in D.C. now, but my dad was a Mets fan from the jump in 1962. And it's hard to pinpoint, at 5 years old, how everything started. But when you're 5 years old, things that you see quite often have a great influence on you. And the Mets were something that kind of I saw very often. I actually lived in New York when I was 5, I guess when I turned 5. But anyway, my dad had a bunch of Mets stuff. And I remember watching the 25th anniversary video and the 1986 highlight video. And then I went to my first game around that same time. I couldn't tell you which came first. But I went to my first game when I was 5 in 1992 at Shea Stadium. And I was hooked pretty much from then on out. It was, and also being in DC when we moved there, I mean, there was no major league team within, 40 miles of the Orioles were the closest team. Right. So I never really was given the chance to be influenced another way, which I'm fortunate for.
It's a funny thing. We complain about being a suffering Met fan, but you know what? I don't think we'd have it any other way.
Yeah, no, and you're right when you talk about like Washington D.C., with the exception of the Washington Capitals last June winning their first Stanley Cup and breaking a long drought for the city. I mean, the Nationals / Expos have yet to get to a World Series, and the Nationals, of course, as we know, and to my great delight, they have never won a postseason series. I hope to keep it that way. But yeah, so it's funny because Mets fans, and of course Mets fans, are kind of my generation, all think that the Mets are some cursed franchise, and in reality, when you look at the grand scheme of things, they are certainly not. They were very, of course, very lucky in 1986, even though they were the best team. And in '69, a lot of things fell into place. And there are some other things. The ball on the wall play in 1973. I mean, that's a play that's like a 1 in a million play.
Right.
And then, of course, as I'm currently working on a new book on the Mets all-time team, and of course, Tom Seaver is on it.
Of course.
And I start to think about that, and that was another very fortunate Mets moment because he comes to the Mets basically through the pick of a hat.
Right.
They had put in, a few teams were vying for his services after like the Dodgers and Braves thought they were going to get him. And it was down to like 3 teams, and the Mets came out in when those 3 teams were put into a hat. So the Met history of the Mets could have been a lot different if another team was chosen there.
Yeah, without him, it would have been interesting. And, we also wonder if Gil Hodges didn't die, what would have happened. There's a lot of things involved in it. I happen to be, I remember going to the Polo Grounds. I've been a fan since the 62 as well. I'm that old. Yes, I'm old. But as a kid, I remember going to the Polo Grounds to see the Mets. I never saw the Giants. I'm not that old. But so I've been around with them since the beginning, and I mean, I've had my not straying, but years of not of drifting, let's say, and always come back home. But the book, the title, Mets and Tens, I think a lot of people would ask, what do you mean by Mets and Tens? So why don't you explain to the good folks what exactly is in this book?
Yeah, so tens being series of top 10 lists, whether it's and it's broken down into, I think it's it's broken down into several sections.
Right.
So the first section is like beginnings, which would be top 10 opening days. Your 1983 game with Tom Seaver coming back. And then, of course, all other, victories. And, of course, there are a lot of Mets opening day victories. Also early Mets and best rookie seasons. And another section is, best, pitching performances, or just a pitching section, which includes single game pitching performances, left-handed pitchers. Then you have another section of hitting, best hitting performances and home runs. And then we have another section that's like, so you get the feeling, you get the gist of it. There are bad stuff. There are bad things. Trust me, like devastating losses, worst trades, busts, and there are a lot to choose from there. So it goes. It is a different way of talking about the entire history of the team, because a lot of these history of the Mets naturally are chronological, or they talk about just the top 50 players or things like that. So I wanted to encompass the history of the Mets in a different way through these top 10 lists that show that the Mets have had a lot of highs and the Mets have certainly had a lot of lows, and both gamuts are covered in this book, as well as the entire 57 season history of the team.
And for those for the listeners out there, this is the kind of book, and I always say this to when I come across this kind of book, but this is the kind of book that you can. What's great about it is that it's got lots of information in it, but it's not something that you have to. I want to say this in the right way. That you have to read cover to cover. I mean, you could skip around and look at sections and see, and it's fascinating to see the different things. And you brought back some memories for me with the beginning section. But that's what I like about a book like this.
Yeah, no, that was kind of the goal when I started to do it. And for me personally, this is my first book, I wasn't going to be able to have the ability to write a biography or some kind of book that I had to investigate through many interviews. So this was a way to probably, get my foot in the door in terms of being an author. So, and you're right. That was kind of the goal of it, was to make it where you didn't have to start, at the beginning. You could start with, the section of all the, best games of the pennant winning seasons, or the all-time team and the second team. So you didn't have to, there's no particular starting point, and it's not like if you stop, then you forget where you left off, kind of thing. So you can always jump in at any time, and you can jump in anywhere.
Now I don't know, but I'm going to ask: have you had anybody that's read the book come up to you and say, "How did you pick that guy for number 6 or that event? That should be number 4." Have you gotten into anything like that?
Not only have I had that, and not in a bad way. I mean, it was someone very nice saying, a fellow author, Eric Sherman, was like, he actually wrote a nice bit of praise on my Amazon site, or on the Amazon profile where it's listed. And like I said, very nicely. Not only has he done that, I've done it to myself. I have a list, the left-handed pitcher section. I reread it. I read it after it was published, and I, start just to glance through it. I started to go why did I have him ahead of him? Why was I doing this? It's because I jokingly say it's, I guess the book came out last April 2018. And I said it was April 2018 me criticizing July 2017 me, because that's when I wrote it in July 2017. I'm like, but that's the beauty of the book, because there is nothing. To me, these lists are not definitive in most sense. It's not like I'm not telling people what the lists are. I'm just giving them what my opinion is. Yeah. And certainly it's always open to interpretation, because if someone says that someone should be higher, a lot of times there's good justification for it. For instance, the greatest, or the worst loss, I guess it's the most devastating loss, devastating losses is the chapter title. You could make a case. I had number 1, the 1988 NLCS Game 4, the Mike Scioscia home run off Dwight Gooden in the 9th inning that eventually led to the loss in the 12th inning. That tied the series instead of putting the Mets up 3-1. And the Mets, of course, went to lose that game. That I put number 1, but you could easily put number 1. And for me, in my lifetime, I would put number 1. The 2006 deciding game,
Carlos
2006 NLCS, the Yadier Molina home run. Carlos Beltran looking at strike 3. So if someone were to say I put 06 Beltran Molina number 1 instead of, so I wouldn't have an issue with that. It's just so people can make arguments. It's not like I'm going to start arguing back.
Well, it's funny, being that you brought up the left-handed starters, I can't argue with 1 and 2. I can't really argue with 3. But as I was first looking through the book and reading it, I saw Tom Glavine at number 6, and I thought, he's got to be higher than that. But then I looked, and if you kind of think about it, you got him in a good spot. He maybe even could have been lower. You could have put Santana or Viola ahead of him.
So I think, if I were to, hopefully the book gets reprinted and I have a chance to revise it, I would put Giovan Santana number 6 ahead of Glavine. Okay. And I'd actually put maybe Sid Fernandez ahead of Bob Ojeda. I think I had flip-flopped them at first, and then I had one in one spot and the other in the other spot, and then I just changed them. That's exactly my point. I reread it and I was like, well, Tom Glavine I think should be lower, and Giovan Santana should be higher. And which I guess makes which is I guess, like I said, the beauty of this kind of book and the debates it incites. It even incites debate itself.
It's fun. And then when I saw John Neese at number 10, I said, John Neese, how the heck did he even make this book? And then maybe there wasn't enough 10 starters that you could have got to, and you had to put him in. But He was he won 81 games, I think you said here, and I guess when you look at the overall picture, he did have some good stuff going there.
Just I was looking. I was like, I was the same. I was like, no, he can't be number 10. And I'm like, okay, I guess he is. So and the write up on him was not particularly glowing. I mean, he certainly was like 81 games, nothing to be ashamed of. But the way he left and being critical of everyone but himself didn't endear himself to Mets fans. And of course, he came back. So
not for long.
Yeah, for a little bit.
Yeah, that's an interesting. That's one of my pet peeves when a guy gets traded. Why can't you just leave gracefully? Leave and keep your mouth shut, because you never know what's going to... It's not that big a league. It is only 30 teams, and you shouldn't wear out your welcome with anybody, because that old team may need your services again. And it's keep your mouth shut and just say, I had a great time, man, and that's it. I was very pleased to see that you put Skip Lockwood in the relief pitchers. I have interviewed Skip. He has a book out, and he's a very nice man, and he was one of the bright spots of those couple of years there.
Yeah, no, he it was hard to do this relief pitcher list because you had relief pitchers how relief pitchers are judged in different eras.
Right.
So like someone like Lockwood or Tug McGraw, they obviously go longer innings, and in the case of Skip Lockwood, the saves weren't as I guess available, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
You had more pitchers going all the way. So it was kind of interesting to try to grade him against someone like Jerry Familia, who has a lot of opportunities at saves, or Amardo Benitez back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So he was certainly very good for those. The late 70s, when again there were less opportunity. There weren't many opportunities for saves for pitchers in the 70s, and there weren't many opportunities to save a victory for the Mets. In the late 70s.
Especially, yeah. So what was your criteria for picking the 10 things that you did? Like when it came to like the beginnings there, you picked the players, and I thought it was an interesting selections that you made. What sort of criteria did you do? Did you just take a look at like the early teams and just pick off names and just take us through how your thought process was in writing this?
So I mean the early Mets and all the troubles they went through. There was the selection process was the selection pool was not particularly deep, and it was mostly stats. It was mostly stats and impact to the team. At the top we have Ron Hunt, which I thought was a pretty easy. I mean, Frank Thomas is up there as well. So it's hard to judge. In kind of we were talking about Skip Lockwood, it's hard to judge a starting pitcher for the Mets in the early years of the team because they weren't particularly given a lot of run support or defensive support. Not saying they were Sandy Koufax, but they weren't given the kind of backing that maybe pitchers of early, I guess maybe like the mid 80s were. So someone like a Roger Craig, who would lose 20 games with regularity, didn't pitch as bad as his record indicates. And for the Mets at that time, he was if not their best pitcher, one of their best pitchers, along with someone like an Al Jackson. So it was it was mostly a statistically based judgment that generated that list. And a lot, there weren't any from Ron Hunt and Frank Thomas at the top. It was it was hard. You could make a case for any of them to be up, higher or lower. It was not clear cut from 3 on down, as far as I remember.
Well, I tell you, in the early Mets, if you were ever going to do an honorable mention, I would include characters on that team, and
Sure.
certainly Choo Choo Coleman would be one, and the other would be Marvelous Marv Throneberry.
Yeah,
They were
that's,
certainly characters.
That would be a great, nice, would a great list to do separately. Just characters, or like as you said, like a sidebar to have like notable names of the early Mets, like a Choo Choo Coleman or Marvelous Marv, because they certainly brought a lot of entertainment to those early years when the team was losing. At least they were not losing. They were not boring.
No, they weren't. I can tell you firsthand. And it is amazing how how we put up with it. They were lovable. They really were lovable. And even to this day, I can remember a lot of the players, and they still get respect around when you talk with older Met fans and stuff, because I guess maybe that it's also, that was our youth as well. So it was very interesting to see that again. The managers, again, it's hard to argue. I mean, I guess you could. A younger fan could argue about Gil Hodges being number one, but I think you explain it very well there. In your first sentence, when you say he was a list of, the hiring of him was a watershed point in the franchise history.
Yeah, no, it was, in my opinion, it was certainly it generated a big change in the direction of the franchise. It also, I don't think, and with all respect to Davey Johnson, who had to, kind of deal with a lot of different personalities and kind of rowdy players, I think Gil Hodges was more impactful to the 1969 team's success than Davey Johnson was to the 1986 team's success. I don't think, and maybe in the history, but I don't think there's any more important manager to a team, especially with the way he, had to, change, lineups with, right-handers and left-handers, and also motivating the pitching staff. I don't think there was anyone more important to a championship team, certainly in Mets history, but maybe in the history of baseball.
Yeah, I'd have to go along with that. And I mean, and if you listen to any of the guys from that team, they absolutely loved Gil Hodges. He was, they still cry when they talk about him. So that's a pretty good indication of the respect that they had for him. And you've got Jerry Manuel in the list. I thought that was an interesting choice.
I was scraping in there.
Did the statistics prove it out? But I guess who else could you have put in?
I think I had like Dallas Green at number
10. Yeah.
Stangle's number 9. So I think Jerry Manuel made the number 8 or something like that. But so you were reaching. I mean, you weren't going to put like Jeff Torborg up there, but you were just like, it was kind of like with John Neese. You're just like, who am I left with? Someone like Casey Stengel, certainly in the history of baseball, might be considered the greatest manager ever, but in terms of the Mets, and look at the hand he was dealt with. But
yeah,
certainly not. Yeah, he certainly did not have much to play with, and yet, also his age was quite, he was in his 70s when he was managing the Mets, and he was more of just almost like a gate attraction. I mean, and he was just also to deflect from all the terrible things that were happening from the field. He was his personality helping that.
I think you're 100% correct there. I think he looked at what he had, and George Weiss, who was the first general manager, he tried to bring back a lot of guys like Gil Hodges and some of the other Brooklyn Dodgers that people knew, to try to get those people here. It was interesting because the Houston at the time came in the same time, and they went for younger guys, and yet the Mets were fortunate enough to beat them to the World Series. But it was. I think you're 100% correct that Casey was really looked at everything, and I think he figured, I got to be the center point here. I've got to be the clown. I've got to get the publicity. I got to do some crazy, and he did some crazy stuff too. Him posing. In those days we had Miss Rheingold and Homer. Was the mask. It was a beagle. I think it was a beagle or a hound. And he was like the mascot of the Mets, and he was there, Homer, and it was just a crazy time. Now, I don't know. Did you do a section? As I glanced, I didn't see it, but did you do a section on the owners at all? I know there hasn't been 10 owners, so I guess you couldn't. Any mention of Joan Payson at all? Mrs. Payson gets so overlooked by everyone, and it's not.
It's good that you mentioned it. I had mentioned her. We didn't have an owners chapter because of I don't think there have been 10 owners.
No.
Certainly, the dealings of Doubleday and Wilpon were discussed in the feuds chapter. Which is high up there, but hopefully you'll be happy to know that in my next book on the all-time team, I certainly intend to mention Joan Payson as the all-time, and I'm putting that in quotes, all-time owner of the Mets, kind of the person that I ideally like to put. And you're absolutely right that she does get overlooked, not only in terms of just the Mets history, but in terms of a woman owning a sports franchise.
Right.
That was totally unknown, and someone doing it without just inheriting it. She actually was the first owner, and she had influence on hirings and how people or how the players respected being there. I mean, she created a great environment to be in. So you're right. I think she gets overlooked in a lot of different ways. So in the next book, she will certainly get the respect she deserves.
All right. and she was there every game. I mean, and no owner's box in those days. She had an owner's box, but it was right next to the dugout, and she would be there every game. And it was, it was just, she became like everybody's grandmother almost. Every fan, she was very recognizable, and it was just a terrific lady. And I know one of my friends that does another podcast, a Mets podcast. Everybody's pushing for a statue of Tom Seaver, and he'd love to see that. Don't get me wrong, but he thinks there should be something to honor Mrs. Payson, because without her and her money, there would be no New York Mets, and I think he's 100% correct.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm all for the Seaver. I'm going to make a wild prediction, and this probably won't come true. that they announced the Seaver statue this year, the 50th anniversary of the '69 Mets. I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe it's just wishful thinking.
I think you could be onto something. So, did you enjoy the QBC, the Queens Baseball Convention? For those that don't know, that's where I ran into Brian, and I exchanged business cards and found this wonderful book. Did you enjoy it, your day there?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad and I drove up from D.C. At crack of like 4:30 and made it up there and had a great time. I mean, obviously meeting people like yourself, fans who had already bought the book, which was really nice to see. Really, a lot of makes you feel very grateful, because it's fun to see people enjoy what you put out there. And met other Mets fans, of course. Got the autographs from Ed Kranepool, took a picture with him, got an autograph from Darryl Strawberry. And we only chose 2 autographs. I think I would also have liked to get Edgar Alfonzo, but oh well. So certainly had a great time selling books, meeting people. It's a great annual event for Mets fans. It gets you juiced up for the next season, for sure, because it's, I mean, you got a little bit of football. Football's my second favorite sport, but it's second by a lot. So, the Mets are number one. So, and when an event like this happens, it also makes you realize that you're not the only crazy person. Like, you're not like you think you're nuts, and then you go to the Queens baseball games, you go, oh wow, I'm normal.
It was literally a sea of blue and orange.
I tell my mother to describe it. She was there a year ago because my dad couldn't make it, and I told her about it. I go, just imagine 250 versions of me. That's what you have.
Well,
so it's great. They sell out. They not only sell out. I mean, the line is just out the door for like the autographs.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, hopefully next year I'm trying to push for a panel. We'll see. So,
okay.
But I'm certainly going to be there next year.
All right. And will you? When is the new book going to be ready and out?
Yeah, the plan is for the book to be out in March of next year. So it would be a Mets all-time team book. Certainly, Tom Seaver's. I'm not going to give anything away saying Tom Seaver's in it, and Mike Piazza and David Wright. And we'll go position by position.
Surprise!
With starters and members. I don't know how big the roster is going to be, but there'll certainly be an honorable mention, and then we'll go from manager and maybe GM and certainly owner. So it'll just be a nice look at all the best players the Mets have ever had. It's funny because the first book was writing about the highs and the lows, but this is pretty much all good
highs,
stuff. So it's nothing. I weirdly like writing more about the negative stuff. So that's the only. I guess I weirdly say the only challenge, but it's a lot of fun to come up with the team. I'm having a lot of fun doing that.
And that's interesting. I wonder if somebody ever put out a completely negative book, if it would sell. Not negative in attacking the team, but bad moments. I wonder if that would people would be interested in that.
I don't know. Some people like to some people are like masochists. I don't know.
Well, this is a terrific book, and by the way, is a foreword in here by Jerry Koosman, and I don't know how you got that, but
luck. No, I actually, to give you the answer, no, I actually had a podcast of my own about 4 or 5 years ago, and I got Jerry Koosman. I actually found his address and wrote a letter to him, typed it up, sent it to him and said, hey, if you want to do an interview, email me, and he did. I was sitting at my desk at work, and I see, on my iPhone, Jerry Koosman just sent you on Gmail,
right?
And which is fantastic. And so I got the interview. It was great. And then when I was thinking about who to get for a forward, I realized I had what I still thought was Jerry Koosman's email, and I just took a shot and explained it to him, gave him, here's what I'm doing for the book and things like that. So he was all in. So, and I'm very fortunate for that as well. So,
well, I'd love to get his email.
It's good to saw that email from 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago.
Do you still have it?
I do. I was in contact with him up until last year, so I still have it.
Well, do you think you could send it to me?
I will absolutely. Just let him know that you've hey, I had an interview with Brian Wright, who you did the forward for us, and I'm sure you would do it.
Okay, great. I'd love to get him on the show, especially this year with the 50th anniversary. That would be terrific.
Absolutely, yeah. That's a great idea.
It's a funny thing. I have talked to Kranepool numerous times. I was even in his house once, and yet I've never interviewed him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, through doing this podcast, a friend of mine who I've had on another author, Brett Topel, he got an invitation because at Kranepool, I probably told this story on the air. I apologize if I did. Brett, he got an invitation to go to Ed Kranepool's house because Ed was raising money for medical bills, and he's selling off some of his memorabilia. And he said to me, he was encouraged to bring a guest or two, and he said to me, "Would you like to go?" And I said, "Sure." So, excuse me. So we went in, I think it was in July, and I have to tell you, it was a very surreal experience because here you're walking in somebody, you know they live in houses and stuff, but I've never, it's hard. I see these guys on television. It's hard to picture them in a regular life, if you will. And he his friend met us at the front door and took us and go downstairs. And you walk downstairs and you start to see some of the pictures on the wall and stuff. And son of a gun, there sitting in the couch was Ed Kranepool. And I'm like, this is unreal.
It is. You think they walk on water, but yet they just
exactly. And he couldn't have been more gracious. I think we were there about an hour. He was just the stories he told, and I almost wanted to turn my phone on to record it, and then I says, nah, that wouldn't be right, I left a card with him and asked him to email me, and he never did, but that's okay. I spoke to him again at the QBC, but one of these days I'll get him. I'll get him. I'll just it's just pretty incredible, but you do find out that they're regular people, and you get the right guy. They're pretty darn nice.
Yeah, especially for the older players. A lot of them are just like, "Oh, you still remember me?" They're like, "Oh, wow, you want to talk to me to talk about 1969? I'd love to because, it's." I know people still want to talk about it, but it's they still revel in discussing probably the greatest moment of their sports life. Right. Certainly someone like Ed Kranepool or Jerry Koosman, that's what they're most remembered for, being on that team. So I'm sure you can get Ed Kranepool, especially this year. He'll probably be in high demand. And he'll be I'm sure there's a way to try to get a hold of him. So I wish you luck trying to get him. I'm
Thanks. And if you don't mind, if you can just shoot me that Koosman address, I'd appreciate it.
Yes, I will. I will do that for sure.
Well, this has been an
hopefully it's still working.
Hey, it's worth a shot. If not, I'll take your advice and I'll send them a letter.
Yeah, that's another that's option too.
Well, Brian, this has been an absolute joy. I really enjoyed it. The time, I didn't know where the heck the time went to. It went so fast, but it's a terrific book. I'm holding it here now, so for those that watch the video will see what it looks like. I recommend you get it. You can keep it at your side and use it as a reference guide or just for some I hate to say I don't it sounds a little I hope it doesn't sound demeaning to you, but it's light reading. It's good to pass the time, and especially on a cold winter night when you're dreaming about baseball, this is the book you want to pick up and take a look at because it's just terrific and you'll enjoy it immensely. And I want to thank you for taking your time out, and it was so nice to meet you at the QBC, and I hope to see you next year there.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to meet you as well, and thanks so much for having me on the show. I had a great time.
I'm so glad, and good luck with the book.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Gary.
All right, I'll be back right after this.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for interesting baseball talk, opinions, and history.
Baseball and BBQ, your place for barbecue recipes, tips, and interviews from the world of barbecue. If you like baseball and if you like barbecue, then tune in to Baseball and BBQ. Find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and BaseballTalkRadio.com, along with Mets Musings and other great baseball podcasts.
This is Skip Lockwood, and you're listening to Mets Musing.
516-619-6341. That is the comment voicemail hotline if you'd like to be a part of the show. And drop us a line, leave us a comment or a voicemail question, anything at all. Call that number, 516-619-6341. Or go to MetsMusics.com and click on that widget in the middle of the screen, and that's a speak pipe, and you can leave a voicemail right through your computer through your computer's microphone. Or if you prefer to do things the old-fashioned way, send us an email at metsmusings@gmail.com. The Facebook page is facebook.com/groups/MetsMusings, and the Twitter handle is @MetsMusings1. And we're back, and my co-host here this week, Jackson's getting a little rambunctious, so I better get going here. He wants to get fed or get played with or something. I don't know. By the way, I want to thank my guest so much, Brian Wright, for being on. It's a great book, Mets in Tens. And go check it out at your local bookstore or on Amazon. Pick it up at his website, whatever. Mets in Tens, so go check that out. And that's going to wrap it up for this week's show. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you will go and subscribe at YouTube or Google Play or iTunes, wherever you watch or listen to the podcast. It's very important. It helps us grow the show. And remember, until next time, keep the faith, stay optimistic, and let's go Mets. Spring training, just a week away. So we'll have more to talk about coming up real soon on Mets Music. Good night, everybody.